Well, good morning everybody. I'm on Mount Tamborine and it's a beautiful day. Not a cloud in the sky. It's a chilly 12 degrees I think it is. But that's very pleasant on the bike if you're rugged up, which I am. And I've come up to Mount Tamborine today for a very special reason. And that is I'm going to Mount Tamborine Cemetery. And I'm going to try and find a grave of a man called John Vincent Damon, who died in 2010, I believe. And he has a very interesting story to tell, does John Damon. He was 69 years of age when he died. He was a married man, a successful businessman, and by all reports, a model citizen. However, John Damon had a secret that even his family didn't know about, and that secret wasn't discovered till several years after John's death. And the secret is that John Damon wasn't John Damon. His real name was William Arnold. And William, as a 16-year-old boy in Nebraska, United States, in 1958, had an argument with his mother and father because he wanted to take the car to the drive-in and they wouldn't let him. Here we are, there's the cemetery. So we'll go up and turn around. So, out of anger, frustration, he murdered his parents and buried their body in the backyard. And to conceal the crime, William went to school, went to church, opened up his father's business, and told family and friends that his parents had gone out of town to visit his grandparents, or visit their parents, his grandparents. And that was fine for several weeks until the grandparents came to town and William spilled the beans. He confessed to the murders, led police to where he had buried his parents in the backyard, and that was as a 16-year-old. So he was sentenced to life in prison in the Nebraska State Penitentiary, and by all reports, for the next 8 years he was a model prisoner. He managed to escape and he fled to Chicago, where he immediately changed his name from William Arnold to John Damon. And whilst in Chicago, he met and married a woman that had 4 children, and he lived in Chicago as John Damon for a number of years. Eventually that marriage broke up and he moved to California, where he met another woman and married her and eventually had 2 children with this woman. In the 1990s they moved to New Zealand, they emigrated, and then they came to Australia. Alright, so here we are at the cemetery. Let's get off the bike, go for a walk and see if we can find his grave. Alright, so let me get this gear off before I continue the tale of John Damon, aka William Arnold. So to continue the story of John Damon, aka William Arnold, they emigrated from New Zealand, or from the USA to New Zealand in the 1990s, and then later from New Zealand to Australia. And here we are, John Vincent Damon. So John Vincent Damon, born August 1st, 1941, died August 6, 2010. So he was 69 years of age. So in Australia, John Vincent Damon moved to Mount Tamborine, which is where I am now. And by all reports, he was a model citizen, and because he was still a fugitive in the United States, his case was never closed. He was still wanted. Eventually it was passed over to the US Marshals, and the case eventually went cold. And then in 2015, the US Marshal, a member of the US Marshal, got hold of the case and thought, I wonder if we can track William Arnold by DNA. And it was William Arnold's brother was still alive, living in the United States. So the US Marshals approached him, requested a sample of the DNA, which he provided. The DNA was then entered into a genealogy website, hoping that there would be a match sometime in the future. And in 2022 they got a match, and it was a match from John Damon's son living in Australia, Mount Tamborine, because he didn't know a lot about his father being William Arnold, and he knew that he came from Chicago in the United States. That's all he had told them, and that he was an orphan. And so the son of John Damon, aka William Arnold, thought, if I can track somebody through my DNA, some family in Chicago, United States, I can find out more about Dad. So there was a hit. In 2022, the US Marshal contacted John Damon's son here in Australia, at Mount Tamborine, and ascertained that John had died in 2010. He then, the US Marshal, came to Australia, got a sample of DNA from John's son, and it was a match. So they were able to prove that John Vincent Damon was in fact William Arnold. And the case of the missing fugitive from Nebraska State Penitentiary was closed. I found that a fascinating story, and I have another one on my channel. It's called The Wicked Boy, and I'll link it in the description. And the similarities are that there was a young boy, 13 years of age, this is back in about 1895, murdered his mother, carried on for several weeks till it was eventually discovered. In those days he would have been charged for murder and hung, capital punishment, but because of his age they accepted a plea of insanity. That young boy was released at 30, came to Australia, served in World War I as part of the Australian Defence Forces, and is buried in Coffs Harbour, and I visited his grave. So check out that video, I'll put it in the description as I've said. It's called The Wicked Boy. Let's take one last look at John Vincent Damon. It's a fascinating story. I came across it several weeks ago, and because I live close by, only about 30 kilometres away on the Gold Coast, I thought I'd visit John's resting place. So RIP John Vincent Damon. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye for now.